Welcome to another episode of Sharp Football Analysis. We're going to be talking today about key contenders and a change that they must make in 2026 to improve their odds to have success, potentially win the Super Bowl. It's going to be a fun show. Let's get started. All right, everybody, welcome in. I am joined by Raymond Summerlin, and we are going to be talking today about some key contenders around the NFL that need to make some slight tweaks in order to improve their odds of winning games. It's been fun researching and uncovering some of these aspects, Ray, and as you well know, we put all of them into the 2026 football preview, which you now can get two different ways. First way, if you want a printed book just like this one, 619 pages of detailed research and analysis in full color, as you can clearly see. Head over to Amazon. It's on sale. I want to say it's like 29% off right now. They change their discount all the time, so don't quote me on that, but as of right now, it's 29% off. Go to Amazon. You can find this book there. If you'd rather have the PDF and save yourself a few bucks, you can use code SHARP10 over at sharpfootballanalysis.com or go to sharp.football or click the link in the description below. There you can use the early bird discount, which is still running and is going to probably end, I think, this week. Stack the code SHARP10 on top of that, get an extra 10% off. This book is the fastest way to get smart for the 2026 NFL season, and it's something that Ray and I and Rich Rebar and the rest of the team have been working on for months. We're so happy to be done with it. And now, Ray, at least for me, you can see by my shirt, I am starting to think a little bit about getting a little bit more relaxation in, as well as it's starting to feel a little bit more like football season. We're past July 4th. We got the book out earlier than ever before, June 23rd. Now we're past July 4th. The World Cup is starting to wind down. Unfortunately, the U.S. men's soccer team dropped their game to Belgium last night. And so the country might be sort of moving on from the World Cup to a degree, getting back into football mode. Did you watch the game last night? What have you been thinking about the World Cup? Are you starting to look forward to the NFL here? Or are you still thinking about the World Cup?
Did I watch the game? I did, in fact, watch the game last night, obviously. It was really just awful, right? Is that like just an awful performance by the men's national team? It was made doubly bad by the fact that my club I support in club soccer is Aston Villa, and one of Aston Villa's best midfielders is a guy named Amadou Onana, and he plays for Belgium. He started for Belgium, and he tore his knee up, and it looks like he probably suffered a torn ACL. So not only did I watch the U.S. men's national team get absolutely embarrassed by a Belgian squad that, let's be honest, is past their best days. That golden generation is not what it once was. Not only did we watch them get completely embarrassed, I watched one of the most important players for my favorite team completely tear his knee up. So anyway, it's going great, Warren. So yeah, I'm moving forward. I will finish the World Cup. I still love the World Cup, but yeah, we're moving forward. We're looking to the NFL. Training camp's not that far away, just a couple weeks here. So we are getting right into the NFL action.
That was injury added to insult for you then, I guess. But for me, I agree with your sentiment overall. The men's national team gave us some high highs over the past, 4 games prior.
We'll always have those 2 free kicks. We'll always have them.
Yeah, those 2 free kicks were absolutely amazing. The fact that they battled their tails off and were able to win 2-0 over Bosnia-Herzegovina, playing a man down for most of the second half. That was absolutely incredible. And the way that they played their first 3 games, although they didn't even, the first 2 games, really, they did not need to win that third game and they lost it at the buzzer, just gave so much hope about the trajectory of the team, the coach. And then they came out, and to me, Ray, it was just like, right at the beginning, I'm seeing like Dest turn the ball over left and right. The guys did not look confident on the ball. They weren't stringing together any sort of passes. It looked like they were put off of their game from the very beginning. The Belgians had some of these deep kicks forward, and it looked like our defense right away, they knew that they were going to try to attack our defenders, specifically Tim Ream. and they felt like they were going to have a major advantage there. And this is not a soccer podcast, but at any rate, I'm not as big into international soccer as you are, but these are just some of my quick takeaways from it. And it just felt like it was an uninspiring performance by the squad. And that's what was the most disappointing. If we played our ass off and we lost 2-1 to Belgium, I don't think anybody would be heartbroken over it. It's the way that they played. It's that third goal that they allowed where the goalie just pulled a Youngwei coup and just kicked his foot into the ground for no reason.
I need a Pablo Torre finds out about whatever was going through Freeze's mind on that one. And also, it's so funny, if you followed U.S. soccer for a long time, the one thing we used to be confident in was the goalkeeper. Those were our players. We had keepers, right? We had Tim Howard. We had
Viola and Tim Howard.
We had Brad Friedel, and we had Keller, and we had even Aston Villa legend, thank you, Brad Guzan. And we had all of these guys that you felt comfortable in. And now suddenly we have people up front that you feel great about, and especially the trajectory, and then no keepers. So it's like, what are you going to do?
But the thing I don't understand is I tweeted the ref view. I said, this is a cartoon. The ref view of that goal where the goalie does that. And then Ream just, I don't know what he's doing. If he just stands still, he blocks the goal. He decides to like hurdle over it and just like allow it right through him.
Yeah, he tried to Jean-Claude Van Damme kick it away, which I don't know. Like, I mean, Tim Ream's a better athlete and more successful person than I'll ever be, so I'm not going to try to criticize him. But it was a funny look. Like, I guess he was trying to open his body up and make sure he could cover as much space as possible. And, it is what it is. But yeah, it looked, especially after you got climbed over for the second goal. It definitely wasn't a great look. It wasn't a great look.
I just don't understand how in a country of close to 350 million people, I believe, that he is one of our best 11 players. Like, I don't understand.
I'm gonna have to push back. Tim Ream was a very good defender in his day. He played in the Premier League for Fulham. Like, he was a very good defender in his day. But yeah, we're a little older. We're a little past it now. To be fair,
we've got these younger, fast striker, and he's our best. I understand he's a captain and whatnot, but I feared. I watched with my family and my kids the documentary leading into it. We'll get onto the real football in a second, but we watched that leading into
getting us started on this.
Getting us started, but I watched that documentary and I said, like, from the get-go, like, the fact that they've got Ream makes the final roster, is named a captain, I was like, this is going to be a problem. And it didn't rear its head for a while, but it definitely was on display in that last game. So at any rate, on to the real football. We got 4 teams that we're going to discuss here, 3 of which have much better odds to win than the 4th team. But the 4th team has made some big changes structurally with the organization, and they've got high hopes this upcoming season as well. So I'm looking forward to diving into some of these topics with you, Ray.
Yeah, no, I'm excited about getting into. That's one of my favorite things about the book is these narratives that you have for all 32 teams. There's so much in there. There's so much interesting stuff for each team. So many things to think about. And especially as we're heading into this season, and this is what the Ford was about. We kind of talked about it last time we were on a podcast about how this year is so wide open. We don't have a lot of these teams that we have, that have traditionally been these powerhouses of the league are not as solid as they once were. We can't just expect them to come out and even win their division, much less really make a deep playoff run. And obviously top of that list is the Kansas City Chiefs, who are coming off of a terrible season. They didn't make the playoffs. Patrick Mahomes coming off a serious knee injury. We have questions. If you go look at our unit rankings in the book, we have questions about this roster almost top to bottom. There are lots of questions. Obviously, they got a lot better at running back, we think, with Kenneth Walker, but we don't know what wide receiver looks like. Defense has questions. We have questions throughout this entire roster, but I know you identified something that could help them even throughout all these issues. Patrick Mahomes coming back from injury. We don't know about him. Even throughout all these issues, you identified something that could help the Chiefs bounce back this year as they look to get back on top.
Yeah, one of the things that really surprised me, and I love, to your point, sharing some of the things that I uncover that are surprises to me, because if they're surprises to me, I think they'll be surprises to you guys as well. Did you know that the Kansas City Chiefs ranked 5th worst at scripting plays last season. This is something that I historically think of Patrick Mahomes, one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, Andy Reid, the best offensive play caller in the NFL, or top 3 at worst. And you would assume that this team would be outstanding scripting plays. And sure enough, in 2021, they were the best offense in the NFL at scripting plays, scoring 3.1 points per drive. But in 2022, they dropped to number 2, still elite. 2023, 2024, they were just above average, barely. Last year, all the way to 28th in the NFL. First quarter points per drive last year from the number 1 highest scoring in 2021, consistent slow decline to number 28 last year. They scored points of any kind on just 26% of first quarter drives last year. That was 50% in 2021, led the NFL. So a massive decline. If you look at their first drive of the game, 31st last year in rate of drives that reached the red zone. The year before that, they were top 5. So we're talking about a top 5 team dropping down to the 2nd worst team in the NFL. It's important to note that they went 1 win and 6 losses in games that they trailed at halftime, which was a very poor rate, well below average in the NFL, of course. And it's in part why they need to get back on track this year, is so they're not trying to dig out of these deficits in the second half by falling into them by being unproductive on their first quarter drives. Other part of it was that in 2025, their first half third down conversion rate inside scoring position ranked 22nd. This was a team that ranked number 2 in the NFL in 2024 at converting third downs into first downs in field goal range. So they struggled in that regard as well. But if they get started faster in 2026, what it will do is it will allow their running game, which is what they obviously added with Kenneth Walker this past offseason, to impact games a lot more in 2026. If they fall behind early due to poor scripting, then you're not going to be able to run the ball nearly as often in the second half of games, and you're not going to be able to utilize that weapon. The other factor here is Patrick Mahomes recovering from that catastrophic knee injury and the operation that he had. We assume he's going to be back on track. The dude's like Gumby, and he's going to heal up, and he's going to be able to be there to the start of the season. But are they going to want him dropping back 45, 50 times? Probably not. Are they going to want him to be leading fourth quarter comeback drives at the very beginning of the season? Probably not. The way to avoid those types of things, high pass attempts or fourth quarter comebacks, is to build leads early. So I think it is vital, more this year than it has been in prior years, with Mahomes recovering from his injury and with Kenneth Walker now on the team, that this squad, and Andy Reid in particular, focus a lot on aggression early in games, trying to score touchdowns in those first quarter drives and on their opening script to make life easier, something that they weren't able to do last year, where they ranked as one of the 5 worst teams in the NFL. And I think that key, if they can solve, will definitely help their prospects of winning games and advancing to the Super Bowl in 2026.
And I do wonder if Kenneth Walker is going to help this, just by, I don't think we can overstate how lackluster the running game has been for Kansas City recently. It's not just that they don't run the ball a lot, because they don't. They have been near the top of the league in pass rate over expected ever since Patrick Mahomes took over, which makes sense. You have one of the greatest quarterbacks that's ever walked the face of the planet. Obviously, you're going to lean into the pass. You don't need to convince Andy Reid to lean into the passing game. And obviously, that's how they're set up. But we've seen that passing game, as you mentioned those numbers, of their scripted plays, that also matches, not to the same degree, but a lot of the fallout we've seen in just the passing offense itself, as they've lost Tyreek Hill, as Travis Kelce has gotten older, as the talent around just hasn't been as good to make this offense, flow the way it did, and specifically to have this offense create explosive plays, which is something they really set out to do last season, to to middling effects. One of those ways you can get explosive plays is through Kenneth Walker, who is one of the most explosive running backs. And Rich Hribar has actually written extensively about this. It's actually in his running back tiers, which are now available on the website, sharpfootballanalysis.com. Go and check it out. 26,000 words on the running back position for fantasy. So go and make sure you check that out as part of the fantasy football draft kit. But he's written about how Kenneth Walker's been one of the most explosive running backs in the league since entering the league. And that was running into a lot of heavy boxes, which we don't expect as much in Kansas City. And we know what explosive plays do to scoring probability on drives. And so if you're not getting those 3 yards in a cloud of dust, Big Ten style runs from Isaiah Pacheco and Kareem Hunt on your opening drives of the game, does that open up the offense as well? And so I think it all kind of works together as we look to see where they're going. Obviously, we have a change at offensive coordinator again with Bieniemy coming in. So there are lots of just moving parts here as we get around it. But I think you identified, Patrick Mahomes coming back from injury. That's obviously important. But are they good enough out wide and at tight end with this version of Travis Kelce to actually make that big improvement? I think that's a really fair question for the Chiefs as we move into 2026.
Yeah, and I encourage anybody who's curious to our thoughts as the answer to that question, check out the preview book, because we write a lot there. You do, Rich does, I do, about what we really think this team is. We have a whole roster evaluation of all the different unit ranks about the Kansas City Chiefs. And there are some question marks here that people need to be aware of. This is not just the team that you pencil in to say they're likely to win the AFC this year and go to the Super Bowl. This is a roster and a team that is changing and has more chinks in the armor, so to speak. One note that Rich was hinting at that I did a little bit of different digging in that we put in the book. This is a great stat, in my opinion. 20-plus yard runs since 2022. All Kansas City Chiefs running backs, they've had 1,348 rushing attempts, and they had 17 total runs of 20-plus yards. Kenneth Walker on only 821 rushing attempts, not 1,348, but just 821. 32 explosive runs of 20-plus yards, nearly doubling what all the Chiefs running backs put together did on far, far fewer runs. That's going to be an exciting aspect to what the Kansas City Chiefs offer in the upcoming season. And, we do opine a little bit on the Matt Nagy versus Eric Bieniemy discussion. We'll get into more of that in the 2026 football preview. So I highly encourage you to make sure you go ahead and grab that. And might as well say that, we have worked for months on this book. It has been awesome to see the positive reaction from so many of you guys who got your hands on the book early, both on reviews on Amazon, which I highly encourage you. We make a little bit less on this book on Amazon. If you buy it from the website, we make a little bit more on the PDF. You buy from Amazon, we make a little bit less. If you bought it from Amazon and you like it over there, make sure that you go and give it a review on Amazon, because that's what is going to force us to keep putting it up on Amazon. It's not that we make more money. If you guys love it and you guys are saving money versus trying to print this on your own, which it does save a ton of money versus trying to print this on your own, 619 full color pages, please give us a positive review. But if you have yet to purchase the book, we are doing something very special for all listeners, and that is use code SHARP10, SHARP10. That gets you 10% off the entire site. So let's say you bought the book and you also want to go buy a betting package. Use that code. You can get 10% off any betting package. You get 10% off the fantasy package. If that's all you're interested in, you want to get the bundle to get the draft kit, plus the in-season fantasy from Rich Hribar, the running back ranks running back tiers rather, that Ray just mentioned, Rich finished. Those things are up on the website for you to read right now. You won't find a more comprehensive and extensive look at the 2026 running back field for regular football, but fantasy specific, than what Rich puts together every single year. It is a labor of love for him. It's work for Ray to edit those words, but it also is some of the best information. Also a labor of love, but it's some of the best information. So I highly suggest that you use this 10% off discount. Go over to sharpfootballanalysis.com, take advantage of that, whether you're looking to just lock in a great discount on the PDF of the 2026 football preview, fantasy or betting package or a bundle or a combination, get the futures. I think we've released now, Ray, 4 waves of futures, maybe 5. I believe it's 4. We've got a number of team futures, a number of player futures, plus EV across the board. A lot of the lines for the team futures are still widely available. You can still get some of these numbers. I feel really good about every single thing that we have released thus far. We're working together in the prop room, digging up more things. We'll have a lot more to come from the futures streets prior to the start of the season. We've got basically 2 full months left to go before the season kicks off. So a lot more in the futures market. Make sure that you guys go ahead and check that out.
Yeah, the prop room is always popping. It's always me just fighting off the hordes of Tampa Bay Bucks haters. But I still love you, Tampa Bay Bucks. I'm with you, Baker. We woke up feeling dangerous today and a little tired. I won't lie.
Ray, I like your point though on the Tampa Bay Bucks. You said, why do you want me to bet against the best roster in that division? Right?
Yeah. No, yeah, it's crazy for me to be like, I don't know, maybe we should just be okay with the best team in a terrible division. I don't know. Maybe I'm wild. I'm just a simple man, Warren, just a simple country feller, drives my simple country truck. And that's all. That's how I have to do this. All right, let's move on and talk about another AFC West team. We're not going to talk about the Chargers because I'm trying to limit myself from talking about the Chargers because of how in love with them I am this year and how much that worries me. But we're going to talk about the other AFC West contender besides the Chiefs and the Chargers. Those are the Denver Broncos. Denver Broncos obviously coming off a great season. Could have been even better. We don't know if Bo Nix doesn't suffer that freak injury. Are they in the Super Bowl? Are we talking about a different champion? We don't know. This is obviously a very good team coming off a great season, but you spotted a place where they could still even improve coming off of last year.
Yeah, the amazing part to me, and that's what I love about this whole exercise of writing the book, is you look back on the Broncos and you say, this is a team that won 14 games. They might have been able to get to the Super Bowl if not for this freak injury. And we should be feeling good about them. But when I looked back on the Denver Broncos, I was thinking, man, this team really got lucky to win those 14 games, even though they were elite in a number of situations. No team that has won 14 games in NFL history has ever trailed in at least 15 games, other than the 2025 Denver Broncos. All told, in games that Denver trailed at any point, which was 15, they went 12-3 in those games, an 80% win rate. That ranked number 1 in the NFL. How did they win so many games despite trailing? Their fourth quarter point margin was plus 64, which was the number 2 best in the NFL. They scored 131 fourth quarter points. They held their opponents to only 67. If they didn't outscore their opponents by those 64 points in the fourth quarter, they would not have gone 11-2 in one-score games. They would not have gone 14-3 overall. So the question to me, once I researched that information, Ray, was how is a team that has one of the most impactful defenses in the entire NFL, the best defense in the NFL, and an offensive line universally ranked in the top 5, how are they in so many situations where they're trailing in 15 games? How are they not more dominant out the gates? Why do they need to go 11-2 in one-score games with such a great defense and a dominant offensive line on the other side of the ball? Unfortunately, the answer to that was, to me, it got to Sean Payton. And the Denver Broncos made a big decision this year to replace Sean Payton calling plays with Davis Webb. And we'll get to that in a moment. But let's first talk about Denver winning those games. They played offensively. Their offense played the 9th easiest schedule of defenses last year. They played just one top 5 defense all year. They played 9 games against bottom 10 defenses last season. And yet they ranked number 23 in early down efficiency. Last year, the year before that in 2024, they ranked number 29 in early down efficiency. So this has been a problem. And despite playing an easier schedule of opposing defenses in another year with Bo Nix in the same offense, they still ranked bottom 10 in early down efficiency. They ranked number 27 in second down yards per play. 27 in second down yards per play. They were close in line to the New York Giants offense, the Las Vegas Raiders offense, and the Carolina Panthers offense. On first half early downs overall, they ranked 24th in yards per play, 22nd in EPA per play, 23rd in success rate. Their first half offense overall ranked 27th in rate of drives to reach the red zone, 26th in rate of drives to score points, 25th in points per drive. So how is all of this possible with Sean Payton at the helm? Well, I did not necessarily love their play calling and their strategy, and I also didn't necessarily love some of the predictiveness of their play calls. So let me get into that right now. They had a 66% pass rate in the first half. That was the second highest in the NFL. They ranked 32nd in pre-snap motion rate. On first half early downs where they were struggling, they had the 5th highest rate of 11 personnel, the 8th highest shotgun rate, and the number 2 lowest rate of pre-snap motion. So essentially you're talking about a team that's lining up in shotgun in a 3 wide receiver set without using motion and just snapping the ball the vast majority of the time, offering very little disguise along the way. When Bo Nix was in shotgun on early downs, Denver was 79% pass, which was the number 5 most pass heavy. We're not talking third down, just early downs. So we're talking about nearly 80% of the time you're passing the ball if Nix is in shotgun. If Nix is under center, Denver is 29% pass. So that's the 7th most run heavy. So a defense is getting tells here. 80% of the time Nix is in shotgun, it's a pass. 30% of the time he's not in shotgun, it's a pass. That is ammo for the defensive coordinator and your predictiveness from a play calling perspective. Then you got the factor that I think Webb is going to change a lot as well here. And that is when Nix did pass the ball last year, he was not explosive or aggressive with it. They averaged 8 plays per touchdown drive. That ranked 10th worst in the NFL. They threw the ball at or behind the line of scrimmage at the 5th highest rate in the NFL. They threw the ball within 10 air yards at the 5th highest rate. 74% of their passes traveled no deeper than 10 yards. So there wasn't really any challenge to attacking the defense. And so the defense could play this offense a little bit easier. And I think this is where Davis Webb, with the combination of new wide receiver Jalen Waddle and new running back Jonah Coleman, and maybe the healthy return, hopefully, of J.K. Dobbins, all these are going to play a factor in a team that has a little bit more disguise pre-snap. So the defense doesn't anticipate what they're going to do. And then a little bit more aggression with the attack post-snap and trying to attack this defense and challenge them a little bit more to be more efficient on early downs. Getting all the way back to the start of this long discussion here, that will help the Broncos jump out to leads where they don't have to trail. And once they can build the lead with a solid defense and an improved run game, which was a factor, Sean Payton was working around a run game that didn't have a lot of success, despite the fact that their offensive line was elite. The run game wasn't having success because of their play calls as well as the running backs themselves. You're going to be able to salt games away a little bit easier. You don't have to go 11-2 in one-score games. So I think, to me, Ray, as it relates to the Broncos and their ability to win games and repeat and get back to where they were last season, they're not going to be able to go 11-2 in one-score games. They're not going to have the success, the fourth quarter points and holding their opponents down and scoring so much. They're going to have to win games earlier on in the games, and it's sort of like the Kansas City Chiefs in that regard. If they can start faster, be more efficient on early downs in the first half, I think it's going to go a long way for the Denver Broncos to get back to what they want to be, which is back into the AFC Championship game and hopefully winning it this year.
Yeah, and I think the personnel changes you mentioned are important in addition to Webb. We saw that offense change after J.K. Dobbins went down. They were already, pass heavy. They were, I think 4 or 5% pass rate over expected before the J.K. Dobbins injury. We saw them go even more pass heavy after that, just because R.J. Harvey was having no success as a runner. Was that because of him? Was that because of the play calling? I mean, there was some of that in Harvey's profile coming into the NFL. So, I think it was a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B, probably. We know J.K. Dobbins, when he's healthy, is a very efficient running back. He was even last year with Denver, with a lot of the problems that you mentioned from a play calling perspective. He still was effective and efficient as a runner, but we also know that he's probably not going to play the full season. You mentioned Jonah Coleman. Jonah Coleman is one of those kind of running backs, those Kyron Williams style running backs that are going to get you what's there, make sure they keep you on schedule. That obviously can help if Dobbins is hurt and they put Coleman in there as well. But I mean, the Waddle thing is so important because you mentioned where they were throwing the ball, and a lot of those targets were going to Troy Franklin. In fact, we had a period of the season, a large period of the season, in which Troy Franklin was seeing more targets than Cortland Sutton. He was almost operating as the wide receiver one in the offense. And this is not a shade against Troy Franklin, but where he was being used, close to the line of scrimmage, behind the line of scrimmage, Jalen Waddle is going to be better at that. Jalen Waddle is going to create more after the catch than Troy Franklin was able to create after the catch. Jalen Waddle will be able to create more explosive plays with those short passes, and also has the ability to stretch the field as well. And so in addition to Davis Webb, we have these personnel additions, in most specifically Waddle, but Dobbins coming back from injury, Coleman being there as an option should Dobbins get hurt, that lends to they're going to have a little bit more success here, especially if they move away from this more, predictable play calling that they had, especially at the end of last season.
Yeah. And look, Sean Payton, I don't know if it was Sean Payton just came up with his own idea. Let's give play calling to Davis Webb, or it was the fact that Davis Webb was going to get hired to be an offensive coordinator somewhere else. And if we need to retain him, and Sean Payton went out there and said, I think he's got a gift. I think he's really smart. I think will be a great play caller. If he didn't do this, Davis Webb was going to be gone. And he wanted to keep Davis Webb involved. Davis Webb was a backup quarterback in Buffalo, worked with Brian Daboll and Josh Allen, apparently was pushing throughout 2025 as the quarterback coach for a more aggressive scheme design. And so I think that's what we're going to get a little bit more here. Now, the flip side of this, Ray, is the fact that we know how risk averse Sean Payton is from turnovers and sacks. He came up with this entire formula, which we're going to do an article on here in the month of July, about which quarterbacks are going to have the most success in the NFL. And it's quarterbacks that don't take sacks, don't fumble the football, don't throw interceptions. It's having positive plays with very few negative plays. And that's one of the things that Bo Nix did really well in college, and then translated that into the pros and had a lot of success in doing that. And so here's one of the key things that I'm just so fascinated to watch, and I'm like getting giddy just discussing it, Ray, which sounds weird, but I'm excited to see what Sean Payton's reaction is to Davis Webb calling more aggressive plays, more down the field plays, more attacking plays, because inevitably those plays are going to have a higher turnover potential, high rate for taking a sack because you have to drop back deeper, higher likelihood that you're throwing an interception because the ball is deeper down the field. I mean, when you're asking a quarterback to take super quick drops and throw it short, playing from shotgun out of 11 personnel without pre-snap motion, and you're just dinking and dunking, that's easy not to take those negative plays. That's what they were doing last year. They were terrible from an early down efficiency perspective, but they were able to win 14 games and make it all the way to the AFC Championship. So then the question becomes like, is this aggressive attack that maybe they start implementing under Davis Webb going to result in a couple more interceptions, turnovers, or sacks? Now Sean Payton gets freaked out over and has to scream at Davis Webb on the sidelines, or ends up taking away play calling midseason. Like, I just cannot wait to watch it unfold. But I think if they really want to get to where they need to get, they need that more aggressive play calling on early downs. And to your point, the new personnel is definitely going to make a difference for them. But they've got the great foundation, a solid defense and a solid offensive line. Just need a little bit more. Hopefully they can get that if you're a Denver Broncos fan. Speaking of getting that, this episode is brought to you by Novig, where America trades on sports, where you can spend $5 and get 50 in Novig coins with code SHARP50. That's SHARP50. Trade against other users for better odds without the house being involved. Download the app and use code SHARP50 today. All right, Ray, we've got two more teams to talk about. Let's get into the next one.
Yeah, I was interested when we went through our unit rankings in the book of where people had D'Amico Ryans, because I think that what Houston has done since he's become coach is probably underrated because of the fact that they do play in an easier division, right? And so we look at it and we go, okay, well, they're making the playoffs. That's what they're supposed to do. But they've won a playoff game, I believe, in every one of his seasons as the head coach there. Obviously, we know that their defense is elite and we expect it to remain as such this season. But even throughout all of this success and, you know, even throughout everything that D'Amico Ryans has done, we have these lingering questions about their offense. It just hasn't gone away. CJ Stroud had a great rookie year. We've had questions about him since then. We obviously had questions about the offense last year, especially since it seems to run hot and cold at times, right? And so their offense is very, very interesting. And I know you identified something that maybe not even necessarily help them be better, but help them be more consistent. Get rid of this hot and cold and really support that defense, because we know what this team can do. We know what that defense is. And whenever everything's hitting for this offense, we know how good they can be, but it just hasn't been there recently.
No, it hasn't. Speaking of which, here is the book, and here's where we did rank D'Amico Ryans as a top 10 coach overall between everybody on the staff who voted in this. The defense, absolutely elite. You can see here the offense, some question marks. And so that's where I turned. I think the defense is going to be elite in 2026. Once again, we've got them as the number one best front seven and the number one best secondary. You can find that for all 32 teams, by the way, in the 2026 football preview. We've got every single team and position unit ranked. But as it relates to the Houston Texans, the thing that really was problematic for them was the run game all over the field and their red zone passing. And I think everybody was very down on CJ Stroud last year, and kind of his performance to end the season in the playoffs, that loss in New England, playing outdoors in inclement weather, really left a bad taste in everybody's mouth about this guy is terrible, because I think he didn't play that great against the Pittsburgh Steelers the week before, but their defense basically won them that game. The reality is this: if you look at, I want to say there's like 44 qualifying quarterbacks in this. Over the rest of the field, besides the red zone, over the rest of the field, out of 44 qualifying quarterbacks, CJ Stroud ranked number 13 in EPA per attempt, number 17 in yards per attempt, number 22 in both completion rate and in success rate. So we're talking about an above average quarterback everywhere else other than the red zone. But inside of the red zone, he and the Texans offense in general was a disaster. They ranked 40th in success rate, 28th in EPA per pass attempt, 41st in yards per attempt inside of the red zone. Part of their struggles in the red zone, I think, relate to Nick Caley in year one with an offensive line where they were trying to implement man blocking, which had traditionally been a zone blocking offensive line. Mm-hmm. And that had cascading ripple effects over everything, because number one, this offensive line did not have very good personnel. They tried to bring in new personnel from the 2024 season to 2025, but they didn't fit in very well to the blocking scheme that Caley was trying to introduce, which he brought with him from the LA Rams. Number two, as a result, in part because of that, but also because of some injuries, this rushing attack was a disaster. In the red zone, they ranked number 29 out of 32 teams in success rate and number 31 in yards per carry. That's in the red zone. But over the course of the rest of the field in general, they were also terrible. They ranked 30th in success rate. They ranked 29th in EPA per rush, and they ranked 27th in yards per carry. So they did not have success running the football. The prime reason there is because they entered the season expecting Joe Mixon to be their RB1. Joe Mixon never played a snap for them because of his injury. They were left with Woody Marks, who was a fourth-round rookie who was never supposed to be the bell cow running back for the Houston Texans in his rookie season last year. But he was thrust into that role because of the injury to Joe Mixon. Marks was a massive liability in both the receiving game, trying to catch balls out of the backfield where he was terrible, and in the pass blocking game, same situation. If he's on the field and they have to throw the ball, he's a liability. Rich noted that Marks graded out as the number 46th best running back in pass blocking in true pass sets. So he was bad pass blocking. He was bad as a receiver out of the backfield. As a result, they had to incorporate Nick Chubb, specifically on some of these passing downs, which made the offense very predictable. Is Nick Chubb out there? More likely to be a pass play. Is Woody Marks out there? Very unlikely to be a pass play just because of how bad he is. Chubb, though, when he was running the football, was terrible as a rusher. Out of 49 qualified running backs, he ranked 49th in success rate, 43rd in EPA per rush. The one thing that Chubb did where he had an advantage over Marks was Marks is a fourth-round rookie running in this new scheme in the NFL, doesn't see the holes nearly as well. Marks averaged 1 yard before contact, which was 41st in the NFL, whereas Chubb ranked 15th in yards before contact per rush. So Chubb didn't have any explosiveness, but at least he could see the holes. Marks was very bad at diagnosing them, but was very explosive once he was able to get through a hole. And it made for a inconsistent and bottom 3 rushing attack, whether you're before you get to the red zone or inside of the red zone. And kind of where this transitions into the 2026 season for me is you've got Caley coming in with this new rushing attack where they've gone out and overhauled the offensive line for a second consecutive season. They brought in Wyatt Teller. They brought in Braden Smith. They added Evan Brown. They re-signed Trent Brown. They drafted Keelan Rutledge. They're building a line that's going to be able to utilize the man blocking principles that Caley wants to introduce here. In 2024, the Rams led the NFL in man blocking runs. In 2024, the Texans were down at 9% man blocking runs. That was 27th in the NFL. So you got a team that was number 1 where Nick Caley was, going to a team that was 27th. And so they tried to implement that same scheme. They lowered their outside zone rate down to 27th last year. They jumped up to number 2 in man blocking rate, right behind the Rams. But the offensive line just couldn't deal with it in that first season. I think their second season, they're going to have more success implementing that man blocking. Then they also added David Montgomery, who has thrived in that man blocking scheme. I went back all the way to 2024, where he was the 6th best success rate and 8th best EPA and number 1 lowest stuff rate running in man blocking schemes. And that's exactly what he's going to get, probably at the number 2 highest rate in the NFL behind the Rams on the 2026 Houston Texans. So this offensive line has been overhauled for a second consecutive year. They also are adding a new running back who fits better with this man blocking scheme. If the Houston Texans are able to get more out of the run game, with, as we know, the personnel last year was a disaster because they weren't expecting to need to rely on a 4th-round rookie. And they're going to have more success running the football outside of the red zone and inside of the red zone. Inevitably, that's going to help CJ Stroud and his struggles inside the red zone because, as these stats alluded to, he was actually fine outside of the red zone. They were just terrible passing the football inside of the red zone. I think the upside for the Houston Texans offense is a lot better than some people are expecting them to be because everybody is just thinking that CJ Stroud sucked last year in the postseason. And I'm not expecting top 10 results here from this passing attack and this offense overall, but I am expecting a level of improvement this year if this run game has been fixed to a degree that will really work well, Ray, with their defense and then allow this team an even higher ceiling with a very high floor in 2026.
Yeah, and I wonder if people are maybe a little lower on David Montgomery because he didn't, he lost a lot of carries, a lot of work to Jahmyr Gibbs last year, but not being as good as Jahmyr Gibbs is not like it's not like a damning thing. You're not as explosive as the most explosive running back in the league, or one of the most explosive running backs in the league, I should say. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's fine. But I think your point about what Montgomery has done in this type of blocking scheme, the changes they made at the offensive line. Again, we're talking about personnel here. And I do think it's interesting that we're talking about running game personnel often as we go through these 3 teams, which is going to, it says something about where we are in the NFL as we're transitioning into maybe a new offensive environment in the NFL as defenses have changed. We'll see how that goes. We'll see how long this zag actually ends up lasting. I do wonder if defenses have baited front offices into making some bad decisions with maybe money and draft capital for blocking tight ends. But, we'll see how that goes as we move through the season. But this is, we've talked now about, I think, 3 running games as we talked about these 3 offenses. I don't think that would have been the case 5 years ago. And so it is an interesting kind of look into the changing landscape of the NFL.
No, absolutely. And I was on the Giants official podcast earlier today, in fact, and we were talking about this very thing where in modern NFL in 2026, I believe that there are very few downs that aren't potential run downs, right? Because of where you start with the football closer to the opponent's end zone than ever before, with the strength of kickers now more than ever before, you're in situations where it's like 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7, and that could be a rundown for certain teams because then the defense is playing pass, they could set themselves up for 4th and short, and then they can potentially go for it on 4th down. You're having teams that are a little bit more likely to run it on 2nd and 10, knowing they've got 4 downs to work with and they have slightly better field position. So it's more incumbent on defenses now more than ever before to be a decent run defense without putting an extra player in the box. They have to figure out better ways to slow down rushing attacks with just your standard box counts. And that's going to be difficult as they try to play to prevent the explosive plays over the top, to prevent points early. Offenses are now going to be able to run the ball a little bit more consistently and across all 4 downs, theoretically, than they have been in prior years. So it's going to make it very interesting to see how things play out this year.
It's funny you brought up the Giants because that's the last team we want to talk about here. Obviously, they don't fit as neatly into the contender bucket as the other 3 teams. Although, I will die on the hill that the Giants were better last year than their record indicated. And I did die on that hill, and I am now dead. But I will still die on that hill. Obviously, they made massive changes this offseason to the coaching staff. We're going to see a lot of a different defense, all of that kind of stuff going on in New York. But the most important part of the Giants is Jaxson Dart and what we see from him in year 2. We obviously got a lot of really good glimpses of what Jaxson Dart could be, but we then also saw him leave a lot of games early, get a lot of concussion checks. It seems like the Giants are going to want him to play more carefully in 2026 than he did as a rookie, which obviously makes a lot of sense if you think he's your franchise quarterback. But I think you would caution that they can't let the pendulum swing too far towards making him a pocket passer.
No, that's correct. Look, I agree with you 100% that the 2025 New York Giants were far better than their record indicated. I think their results in 1-score games really cost them. Their defense and they're giving up a lot of points in the second half of games, especially in the 4th quarter of games, really cost them. I think people had inflated expectations about what this team was going to be entering 2025. Keep in mind, they were only favored in 1 game entering last season. When I wrote this book and I published how many games you're favored in, the New York Giants had a big fat 1 next to their name, and they were underdogs in 16 games entering the 2025 NFL season. So they weren't expected to win that many games. I'll first share some of the statistics about what Jaxson Dart did last year, and then I want to get into what he could be this year with John Harbaugh as his head coach, because I think it presents an interesting discussion about the tolerance for a mobile quarterback with what John Harbaugh worked with in Baltimore with Lamar Jackson. But as it relates to Jaxson Dart last year, I'm going to just jump right to the conclusion first, and then I'll take a step back. Last year, Jaxson Dart's EPA per attempt on the ground, as compared to every single rookie quarterback since 2000, he was the 3rd best EPA on the ground. His total EPA added was 46.3 EPA, 3rd best of any rookie quarterback, behind only Jaden Daniels and Cam Newton. Obviously elite. But from a passing perspective, when he's actually passing the football, negative 15.1 EPA, which ranked 35th in the NFL. So 3rd best rushing, 35th best passing. Obviously not a great split. It just goes to show you how important it was for him to be able to get out of the pocket on some scrambles, as well as to utilize some of the designed runs for first downs, especially on some of those third down situations. That was vital for him. Some big picture statistics, his 9 rushing touchdowns were third most by a rookie in NFL history, behind only Cam Newton and Billy Kilmer. He had 17.5 EPA on designed runs. That was number 2 in the entire NFL, behind only Josh Allen. Dating back to 2000, his 17.5 EPA on designed runs was behind only 2 rookie quarterbacks, Cam Newton in 2011 and RG3 in 2012. That means Dart EPA on design runs, he was better last year than Lamar Jackson, than Jaden Daniels, than Kyler Murray, some other mobile quarterbacks who have been doing it at a high level for years and years. Jaden Daniels to the exception, who only did it like his first year. On scrambles, he was the 5th best rookie since 2000, behind only Jaden Daniels, Vince Young, Josh Allen, and Drake May. So absolutely elite on the ground and what he brought to the table here. But a liability passing the football. His EPA out of 200 quarterbacks, out of 36 quarterbacks with 200 attempts last year, his EPA of minus 15.1 total ranked 28 out of 36 quarterbacks. You cannot take the rushing out of his game and expect him to have some semblance of success. You have to keep that rushing in his game. The issue is, I went back to his final preseason game and his 9 games that he played in a row, 5 concussion checks over 10 games. That cannot happen in 2026. Now, the interesting aspect here is you've got John Harbaugh, who worked with Lamar Jackson, is very familiar with the mobile quarterback and the upside that the legs and the mobility brings, but is also very familiar that when Lamar Jackson gets banged up and is trying to play at less than 100%, he's nowhere near as efficient or productive. And when Lamar Jackson is out, then you're looking at a backup quarterback who's not going to be as efficient or productive as Lamar. So John Harbaugh has a lot of experience. And so I think it's unique and interesting and kind of beneficial for Jaxson Dart that they didn't bring in a head coach who was a defensive-minded coach who worked with a pocket passer in the past. They brought in a head coach who is not offensive-minded or defensive-minded, who has worked with a mobile quarterback and understands what that brings to the table, but also knows what it's like when that mobile quarterback is banged up or injured. So I think it's going to be actually quite beneficial for Jaxson Dart and his ability to continue to stay mobile and stay utilizing his legs. But there's absolutely no excuses here or no room for vagueness in what I think Harbaugh is going to instruct Dart. You have to preserve your body for us to be able to win games. You have to get down. You have to pick your spots. We want you to be using your legs, but you cannot be reckless and endangering yourself because you're in turn endangering your team. And while you think you might be unselfish by taking off and running there, you're actually selfishly putting yourself in harm's risk and causing the team problems. So there's a fine line that he's going to have to walk like a trapeze artist or whatnot this season with his utilization of his rushing. But I think that they will still have him running the football. It's just a matter of when or where. But he is not at the position in his career where he could just become a pocket passer and have success. The defense needs to have that threat. And it actually will help his rushing if he doesn't take off quite as much, but the defense is expecting him to, because then they're going to spy him, but then that spy is taken away from some of the passing plays. And so they're able to get better matchups down the field. The other thing that I think benefits him is the offense that John Harbaugh is familiar with, where you do lean a little bit more into a powerful running back, like you had Derrick Henry. Obviously, now he's got Cam Scatterbo, heavier personnel, a strong receiving tight end like Isaiah Likely. I think all of those factors allow for more opportunities for play action and shots down the field out of heavier personnel groupings to make passing a little bit easier, especially if the defense is looking to spy Jaxson Dart. So there are definite upsides here for the New York Giants in 2026. The only thing that I'll mention in terms of and this is like not a discussion on Jaxson Dart whatsoever, but in terms of them being a contender in year one, I just want to toss out some of these turnarounds that we have seen in recent coaching. Liam Cohen turned the Jaguars from 4-13 into 13-4 in year one. Ben Johnson turned the Bears from 5-12 to 11-6 in year one. Kevin Stefanski turned the Browns from 6-10 to 11-5 in year one. Mike Vrabel turned the Patriots last year from 4-13 to 14-3 in year one. Dan Quinn turned the Commanders from 4-13 to 12-5 in year one. When DeMeco Ryans, who you mentioned when we were talking about the Texans, took over for the Texans, he turned them from 3-13-1 to 10-7 in year one. Shane Steichen, +5 wins for the Colts. Kevin O'Connell's Vikings, +3 wins. +5 wins as well. Doug Peterson's Jaguars, +6 wins. The one thing that all of those coaches that I just mentioned have in common is they are experts in one side of the ball or the other. They were either play callers on offense, and they got the job because they were a highly sought after offensive-minded coach who was ready to be done being an OC and ready to start calling plays, or they were a defensive-minded coach like a DeMeco Ryans, Dan Quinn, et cetera, and they were able to coach up their side of the football. It is more rare for a special teams type coach or like just a manager style coach like John Harbaugh to come in, and with the coordinators that they've got for the New York Giants this season, we're talking about
Nagy.
his name's Matt Nagy from the Kansas City Chiefs coming in here and like calling the offense, and all of a sudden this team really turning themselves around massively. They were a better team than their record shows last year. And I think they've got a higher floor this year as long as Dart can stay healthy, in part due to the coaching and in part because they were better than their final record indicated. But I think we need to be cautious in year one about expecting this massive turnaround for the New York Giants. Oh, if Liam Cohen can turn the Jaguars around and if Ben Johnson can turn the Bears around, then we can do the same. Well, that's because they had an elite play caller there on that side of the football.
Greg Roman also there, it seems, in a pretty important offensive position. The other thing I would say about this offense just in general is we still have everything we look at from this team, from what they did this offseason, from who's running their offense, suggests they are going to have heavy sets. They're going to lean into the run. Jaxson Dart's even already said that this offseason, that he's not expecting to throw as many passes. So it does seem like they are leading that way. Obviously, they signed Isaiah Likely. They still have Penn State legend Theo Johnson. They have two very good tight ends. We also don't know about Malik Neighbors still. We don't know what that's going to be. And if you don't have, you talked about some of those Dart numbers as a passer, but also who was he throwing to? He was throwing to, Wan'Dale Robinson. God bless him. He got paid, but do we think Wan'Dale Robinson is really like a true wide receiver one, even in his expanded usage at the end of last season? So there were some mitigating factors for Dart there as well. But yeah, I do think this team is interesting because I do think they're talented. I still think that they're talented. Obviously, you lose Lawrence on the defensive line. The defensive line has questions, but we know what they can do on the edge. They have Arvell Reese. I think they have, obviously have talent at safety. We'll see what their corners can do, but I do think they're a good team. I do think they're talented, but this coaching staff is, I would say, interesting, and more interesting than a lot of the names that you brought up with, like Liam Cohen, who we wrote about it in the book last year. You wrote about it in the book last year. We had a lot of faith in what Liam Cohen was going to be able to do. Obviously, Ben Johnson, Mike Vrabel, who had a history of overachieving with the Titans, and I think was underrated as a coach before he got fired. Diana Rossini agrees with me. And I think that, we look at all of those things and we, you say, okay, that makes more sense. I look at this coaching staff and I go, Kansas City was kind of happy to get rid of Matt Nagy. The Chargers are kind of happy to get rid of Greg Roman. What do we got here? So it's going to be an interesting situation, I think, for the Giants.
And the Ravens were happy to move on from John Harbaugh as well. So
sure.
I don't disagree. In terms of the Giants being better than you might have thought because they were only 4-13, like you said, with Malik Neighbors. Let's keep all of this in context as we're talking about the 2025 New York Giants. This was a team who wanted to ease in Jaxson Dart over a period of games, and they had to throw him in there week 4 because Russell Wilson was an epic disaster in 2 of his 3 starts. So all of a sudden, week 4, Jaxson Dart, you have to start. I believe it was against like the LA Chargers, Jesse Minter-led defense, if I'm not mistaken, was one of the first defenses that he went up against. Like, not an ideal situation to be thrust into, but the crowd at home was begging for it, and Russell Wilson clearly couldn't do what he needed to do. You play less than one game with Malik Neighbors as your wide receiver one, because if I'm not mistaken, in the first half on a sideline route, that's where he injured himself. The very first half of the first game that he played with Jaxson Dart. So the rest of Jaxson Dart's starts plus half of his first start were without his number one wide receiver. And you mentioned the scraps of other receivers that he was playing with. Also, Cam Scadaboo, who became an absolute stud, destroys his ankle in week 8, and he's no longer available. So your running back one goes down. Despite that, all those injuries that they dealt with, despite the fact that they played 10 games against teams that finished with winning records, the most of any team in the NFL, despite that, this is a team that ranked number 8 in yards per drive last year if you get rid of Russell Wilson's 3 starts. Get rid of Russell Wilson, put all the other games on there. Number 8 in yards per drive. You know where they were in 2024? Number 28. They improved from ranking number 26 in percentage of drives to reach the red zone in 2024, all the way up to number 10 last year. They went from number 30 in touchdowns per drive in 2024 to number 11 last year. They went from number 31 in points per drive in 2024 to number 13 last year. That is significant offensive improvement with a rookie quarterback who's dealing with concussion tents in half of the games that he's playing, without his wide receiver one, with his running back one for only half the season, against a very difficult schedule. So I mean, there are some positive foundational pieces here for the New York Giants, and some room for optimism. If you're a fan, I know all the Giants fans are extraordinarily happy with winning the NBA championship for the Knicks, and they're on cloud 9. I agree with you, though, Ray. The concern I have is their staff in general, their coaching staff in general. I'm not quite sure what we're going to get out of them. It's going to be very fascinating to see how they work with this very young team, full of interesting characters with a lot of kind of confidence and the willingness or desire to like win right now. And what happens if they don't win right now with this new staff, and just the whole process, I think, is going to be fascinating to watch in New York, especially surrounded by a division that has the Philadelphia Eagles, who've got a new offense coordinator, should be better on offense, always typically good on defense, especially with Vic Fangio there. If Jaden Daniels is healthy for the Washington Commanders with the new offense coordinator there, how impactful can he be? They tried to get some new faces on the defensive side of the football there to show some improvement. And then you've got the Dallas Cowboys, who are a team that is always threatening in that division because they've got a high floor with that offense, one of the best receiving cores in the NFL, led by potentially the second best tandem in the league, 1A, 1B with the Cincinnati Bengals, in my opinion, and Dak Prescott and a decent offensive line. So there's some optimism for the Dallas Cowboys. So this is a difficult division that the New York Giants play in the NFC East. But you know, this is a fun conversation, Ray. 4 very exciting teams that have some warts, but some things that they really could improve upon in 2026 and make their life a lot easier. I'm really fascinated to see if these teams end up actually doing some of the things that we're suggesting that they do and win more games as a result.
Yeah, and we're just scratching the surface. Like, it's just almost 4 teams at random that we picked out that have all of these narratives are in the 2026 football preview, and we go through every team in this in-depth way, thinking about what did they do last year, where can they improve, what are the personnel changes, and just thinking about teams in this way. Like, I didn't make a lot of times you have a podcast, you're going to make notes. I don't write down everything I'm going to say, as anybody who's listened to this podcast and heard me knows, because I stumble through all of it. But I have little bullet points of what I might talk about. I didn't make a single note for this one because I've read the entire book and be just able to bounce off it. All of the knowledge that I've gained from reading you and Rich and Ryan and Josh and Tucker and Curtis and Joe. Like, it's just so much in there for you to pull from, that you're going to be able to talk about any team in depth if you go through the book. And so it's always fun to go through these topics, talk about these teams once the book's done in July, and just get ready for the season.
Yeah, this is the best time, because now that the stress and the pressure, there's a lot of stress that goes into finishing this book, and not just finishing it, but like writing the book. And trying to find actionable things that you want to talk about that not everybody else is talking about that you think could make a difference for the upcoming season, what you think teams might do or fail to do. And this is why they're going to win or lose games in this upcoming year, and trying to be right about those things. We're forecasting the future, whether it's teams or players. Like Rich focuses a little bit more on players. I focus on the situations players find themselves in and how it builds to the team's performance. But it's a lot that goes into it. And now that the book is done, and you can go get this, use code SHARP10. You can get 10% off. Early bird special still on the website. Go to sharpfootballanalysis.com or go to Amazon. Now that it's done, we can have these types of conversations. I do a lot of radio hits. I was on, as I just mentioned, the New York Giants podcast right before this from 10:30 to 11:20. As soon as 11:20 hit, I'm getting a phone call from Cleveland. I'm going on Cleveland Browns 92.3, jumping on there till like 11:50. I go get a glass of water and I come jump on here with you. And we really just pulled these 4 teams together within like the 10 minutes right before and said, let's talk about these 4 teams. But we're delivering this ridiculously in-depth, I think, and pretty strong podcast. And all this is in all 32 teams in this book. So if you really want to learn about what we think in the same vein, even deeper on all 32 teams, you've got to check out the 2026 football preview. But it's a fun time of year. There's going to be plenty more of these types of shows coming your way between now and the start of the season. So make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you click that button below and subscribe. Give us a thumbs up if you like this content, because we'll try to get you more and more of it on all 32 teams. We're going to be doing things that are predicting the upcoming season. We're going to get Rich on here with Ray talking about fantasy analysis. As Ray mentioned earlier, Rich's running back tiers just dropped today. He's got quarterback tiers. He's got wide receiver tiers. He's got tight end tiers. The most in-depth content that you are going to find as it relates to fantasy players coming live to you on sharpfootballanalysis.com, as well as on this channel. So whether you're listening to us on a podcast or catching the video over on YouTube, make sure that you're hitting subscribe. Make sure you give us a thumbs up. And, you know, for Ray and myself, I'm just here to say football season is right around the corner. We have made it. We've made it through the doldrums of the summer and the 4th of July. World Cup's about to come to a close. I think more people are going to start focusing on the NFL, and we're going to be right here for you, delivering a ton of content. So stay tuned. We'll see you next time.